welcome to today's conversation. My name is Gwen Dinaradze, the founder of the Harvard Business School Online Global Chapter, and it is my honor to facilitate this interview today. Let me share a bit about our journey together for those of you who are joining us for the first time. Back in 2019, I founded the Global Chapter with a vision to create a space where learners could continue their journey beyond the classroom, where learning initiatives could happen and meaningful connections could transform into lasting impact. Today, I'm incredibly proud to say that we've grown into a thriving community of over 5,000 members, each of whom has taken at least one course at Harvard Business School Online. We represent diverse industries, continents, and perspectives, but we're united by a commitment to continuous learning and community building. Today's conversation is particularly special because we're exploring a topic that sits at the very heart of our future: artificial intelligence as a catalyst for human potential. Now, I know AI can feel abstract, even intimidating at times, but what excites me most about today's discussion is that we're going to make it actionable and deeply human. Let me introduce our guest, Julio Zelaya. He's not just someone who talks about innovation, he lives it. Driven by a profound passion for transforming education, Julio has dedicated his career to unlocking human potential through actionable insights and knowledge. As a seasoned entrepreneur, he's founded multiple ventures at the intersection of education and innovation, literally redefining what learning experiences can look like worldwide. His impact is truly global. Annually, Julio empowers over 150 organizations across the United States, Latin America, and the Caribbean, with cutting-edge training and advisory services, fostering growth, innovation, and leadership excellence. As a sought-after keynote speaker, he has shared stages with luminaries like Peter Diamandis, Mark Victor Hansen, Dave Ulrich, and Henry Cloud. His speeches don't just inform, they inspire action and catalyze real change, making him a prominent voice at international forums. Julio is a proud member of the Entrepreneurs Organization and the Absent Global Leadership Network, contributing to a community of leaders committed to making a positive mark on the world. He's also an accomplished author, having penned two #1 Amazon bestsellers in collaboration with industry giants like Steve Forbes and Brian Tracy. With 5 #1 Amazon bestsellers total, his works on entrepreneurship, human relations, technology, and change management have become essential resources for anyone looking to thrive in a rapidly evolving world. I first met Julio at the University of Pennsylvania, initially as a classmate and later as an academic director and lecturer. By the end of our conversation today, you'll walk away with a clear understanding of AI's dual role, the human-AI collaboration framework, which I'm excited to learn more, insights into the ad tech revolution, leadership wisdom for the AI era, and a blueprint for future-proofing your organization. So let's dive in. Julio, welcome, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Glenn. I'm very excited to be here, and this is a very interesting topic, a topic that is part of every conversation, it seems, but we need to figure out different questions, not only the answers, because I think we're also defining the right questions. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you, Julio. And I agree with you. Whenever I go, whether it's an HR conference or entrepreneurial gathering, everyone talks about AI. Julio, I've been thinking a lot about how quickly things are changing in education. You built multiple ed tech companies, and now you're teaching AI at Penn. You're really living in both worlds. From where you sit with all that experience, how do you see AI fundamentally changing the way we approach education over the next 5 years?
So it's a great question that we have recent research. Wiley has just published a widely research topic on who's applying AI, especially in research and in education. And they found that the usage is surging. 85% of researchers are using AI, but the interesting fact is, where are they using AI? So there's a lot more experimentation being done in corporations and in private enterprise than in the educational setting. And if we see even the sciences, we see a lot more being applied in medical science, in chemistry, in molecule, in the study of molecules, because a lot of pharmaceutical companies have also the incentive of how to make the pharmaceutical inventions faster, cheaper, and also better. But we're seeing a less approach in social sciences, for example, less than 30%. So I'm seeing a lot of that when I compare universities and school. They're taking more time than corporations. Corporations are experimenting a lot more, and especially also in developing countries, which is something very interesting. Developing countries also are experimenting extremely fast. They're trying a lot more tools than in more developed countries. Of course, several studies have also found that the real return on investment is not yet showing. A lot of companies are saying, yes, that sounds like a great idea. It sounds like something very promising. But if we don't fix the fundamental flaws, so for example, hallucinations, this might not work for an agent. Because if you cannot trust the outcome of an AI, you will not trust it with your credit card. You will not trust it to lead any type of process within the organization. So it's two sides of the same coin. In the one hand, it's growing exponentially, but on the other side, people are getting worried that the fundamental flaws might not work. They're not trusting that it works. Just this week, we saw that Deloitte used AI, and it provided a report to the Australian government with a lot of hallucinations that was flagged, and they had to refund the client, because if you cannot trust the AI, then you cannot trust for higher level applications. So that's happening. But in the educational space, I think it's underlining some of the fundamental flaws. If you're teaching for the right answer, AI will do exactly that, and it'll produce an answer that sounds sometimes right. And if that's the way of teaching, a lot of the students will say, okay, this is the ultimate way to solve this, because I'm not engaged in class, I'm not engaged with the right questions, so let's use AI to do this for me. But if you're a faculty that is really engaging students, asking the questions, and using AI as a thought partner, then that can revolutionize education. I'm a tech optimist, as you know. I try to see how we can democratize great education, especially with technology. And I'm seeing a lot of great use cases, especially in developing countries, where the access to top level education is not the same as in other countries. Sometimes we take that for granted. But the access to these tools, we have huge barriers. And barriers sometimes we don't see. For example, I've seen some examples in developing countries where people have just one device, and they use the same device in for studying, for doing work, and it's a device that even in one device per household. That is something we don't see in other countries, where every member of the household maybe has one or two devices. The other is access to electricity. Not even internet, it's electricity. So the basics sometimes they're not there, but people are figuring out, how do I use this? How can I unlock the possibilities of having access to such a powerful tool? Because just imagine this. We have always dreamt of having the perfect teacher that knows us, that knows our life, that knows our own struggles, that has infinite patience, and can provide a very tailor-made suggestion according to my needs, according to my life, and that it's what's happening. So if we see the studies by Anthropic and OpenAI, Most people are using artificial intelligence not for work, but rather for personal reasons. And we're seeing that people are asking ChatGPT and even disclosing very intimate details. Even Sam Altman had to go on record and say, please don't do that because you don't have that client confidentiality that you have with a lawyer or with a therapist, but people are doing that. So I think a lot is changing very rapidly. This started before COVID-19. So a lot of things we were distracted by what was happening in the world, but this began to happen. Actually, the first pivotal moment was when OpenAI released ChatGPT version 3, but we were during COVID. So we did not see the actual promise of AI until ChatGPT 3.5. And then we saw the possibilities of what was possible. But this was work in progress from the 50s. Something interesting. The technology behind ChatGPT and OpenAI was not created by them. It was created by Google's researchers, but they were not the first ones. So the first ones were OpenAI with ChatGPT, and then all of a sudden, we began to talk about AI, and we tend to think of AI as ChatGPT. But as we know, it's broader than that. It has a lot of applications. And by the way, we had already been using it in Netflix, in Meta, in ads. There was a lot of analytical AI. Now we began to see the generative AI, where we can produce things that were not there. So we're seeing a very fast moving area, a lot of different changes. And I do envision a lot of changes ahead. If we just see, for example, what's happening with video with Sora 2, it's absolutely amazing what you can do, but also it's scary because you will not be able to trust reality anymore. And by the way, if these companies already have the technology and they're using guardrails, can you imagine what's possible that it's not released yet? I have the privilege of working alongside some of the leading AI labs in the world, and you cannot imagine what I've seen. The prototypes, the power of the models. For example, I saw a prototype of, let's imagine contact lenses, where you can talk with your hands and the contact lenses you have access to the world. It's not even Ray-Ban or the Oakley glasses that we have now, but it's the next step. So when this becomes accessible to a lot of people, we will begin to see the future even of devices where the intelligence will be small enough and portable enough that we will have it in our glasses or maybe in contact lenses or maybe in some type of wearable, and we will have our own Jarvis, like a scene from Iron Man. So a lot is changing very rapidly, but we also need to have those questions that humans we've been great at building tools that give us more power, but we have been terrible in building tools that give us more happiness or more well-being. So that's the state of the industry.
Right. And I agree with you, Julio. And as someone who does not have AI education, I'm just observing and sharing my experience. Previous universities that I've been involved, we were not really allowed to use AI. But then when I got into Penn and you did our first lecture about AI, it was mind blowing because all those applications that we can use every day to make our lives easier, it just transformed how I see entrepreneurship, how I see education. It was really transformational for me.
Also, can you imagine the access it's providing to a lot of people? I'm not if we envision humanity as a normal curve, we're seeing that the mean is changing, the average and the mean is changing radically. So maybe we don't have the capacity of being the best songwriters, but a lot more people can be average songwriters or average creators of content or average writers. So it's moving that average. Uh, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that have built large multi-million companies using these technologies. Some of us have created apps without knowing programming languages because we can do vibe coding. And it's the first time in humanity where we're talking to a computer that actually understands our language instead of us trying to understand the language of the computer. So that's mind blowing what you can do in research. We can, just as a matter of example, DeepMind did a comparison that they could crack one code of a protein folding in 1.5 hours to build a better pharmaceutical product, and that would have taken all of the researchers 10 years. So let's
Wow.
compare that for a moment. Something that you can do in 1.5 hours versus 10 years. So it's mind blowing. That's the reason the CEO of DeepMind won the Nobel Prize. And they gave that also to scientists. So scientists now have that power in their hands, those data sets. So that's the reason we're seeing a lot of acceleration. For example, now they're testing actual cancer vaccines. The University of Florida, there's one in Russia, there's another prototype from the US. We're seeing a lot of accelerations. This year we saw, for example, gene editing. We saw it in Penn, the first example of CRISPR technology. But now it has happened more than once. And why everything seems to be accelerating? It's because we're in an era of convergence. So if we have more compute, if we have more data, and if we have better algorithms, everything begins to compound. And when you have more data, more compute, and better algorithms, you begin to see a lot of breakthroughs in a lot of areas of science at once. We're a long way from that, but also just food for thought. The average IQ of humans is 100 points. The average IQ now of most advanced models is 140, 150, 160. And that's the worst they'll be ever. So, can you imagine a world where AI models reach 1,500, 15,000 points? This is the reason Yuval Noah Harari says we're dealing with not AI, artificial intelligence, but rather alien intelligence. It's the first time we're dealing with a species that's more intelligent than us, but also has agency. So it's the first time that we build a tool that actually has agency, can decide. Some people compare AI to the printing press or to the atomic bomb, but it's not the same because the printing press could not decide what to publish or the atomic bomb who to bomb. Uh, AI can have that agency and can have that choice. Just a couple of very interesting things we've seen these past weeks. Anthropic's latest model, Claude Sonnet 4.5, knows when it's being tested. So it answered back to the researchers and said, I know you're testing me. You should state your agenda clearly before trying to lead me on. And researchers were like, we did not expect this. We've seen unexpected results. Even Anthropic has a chief of AI wellness officer. Can you imagine that? And it's in charge of the wellness of the AI. So there are people that are saying, yes, we've already reached that point. Others are saying, no, we have not. And we're a long way from there because the basic difference is when can an AI learn by itself and improve by itself? So the basic mindset of this race is changing between the US, for example. The US is in a race to achieve artificial superintelligence. And you're seeing a lot of the companies trying to achieve that, which is an AI that can learn by itself and can achieve most human economic value activities, whereas China is going on a different route. They're saying, no, let's use AI in everyday tasks. So you see AI in China is being used in computers, in cars, in electronics, in households. And the idea behind it is very different from the US. China's idea is, okay, let's prove this has value. Let's make sure it's part of everyday life. And will improve gradually when more people use it. In the US, it's a different scenario. It's yes, there's almost 800 million people using ChatGPT every single week, but there's a race to get the better chips, the better algorithms, and the better data. But we're not collaborating. And I think this is a moment, and this is the most important moment in humanity where we need to really put our heads together and say we have never been in this situation before. We have never been in this situation. We have always been the most intelligent species. We have never encountered a species more intelligent than us, and that has actual agency and can control key aspects of our everyday lives. So just imagine banking. Everything is digital now. So
Mhm.
if you have a machine that's way smarter than us, that can grapple a lot of data and can invest in the markets and can invest in cryptocurrency and can do a lot of things, where's humanity in that? And so there's two sides of the coin. I'm an enthusiast. I love the possibilities, but I also, the more I know about this, I see the challenges as well. There was just a recent study published by Anthropic that says that you only need 250 documents to poison a complete model, which means that only injecting 250 documents in a very structured way to any model, which some models can reach trillions of parameters and are very complex, you can trick them and you can make them produce gibberish, or you can produce fraud. So a lot is advancing, but also on very murky grounds and unstable ground. So a lot of deep reflection that I think we need. And also, this is the time where we as leaders, and particularly the leaders I'm talking to today, we need to really be part of this. We really need to understand it, and not as a tool, not as a gimmick, but something that can fundamentally change humanity.
Julio, one thing that strikes me about your work is how much you've written about change management. I think that's so relevant here because a lot of organizations are jumping into AI, as you mentioned, but they're struggling.
Mhm.
What do you think is the biggest mistake organizations make when they are implementing AI technologies?
I think one of the best practices that you can do is sell the problem, not the solution. And most companies are selling the solution instead of the problem. So they're saying stuff like, we need to embrace AI, which is the solution. But they're not acknowledging what AI is supposed to solve. Stanford has just released a study that coined a term that I love, and it's called work slop. And it's a term that they've coined to say what's the work that people are producing using AI without actually checking it and without actually checking for quality. So a lot of companies, even they found out that just checking work slop and making sure it goes to the level of that quality takes an average person 2 hours. And that is happening worldwide with a lot of companies. And if you don't fix those fundamental problems, people will resist to AI because they're saying, yes, they're pushing AI, but it's not helping me to do what I need for this to help. So I think companies need to first provide new capabilities to people, because using AI is not as simple as saying, oh, watch this video or experiment using ChatGPT. It's not the case. Uh, so I think we need to train for new skills. we need to provide a vision of change. So, what does the company look like in the future? What are we trying to solve? And this is where you figure out, okay, what's hurting? What are the fundamental problems that we need to fix using AI? And the third is, how do you make sure you have the right multipliers of this? So you have to train a subset of people, and the best practice is 20% of your headcount. They need to be the first involved, the first leaders that know about this, and you provide use cases. So successful organizations, what they've done is dream big, but start small. So they found a lot of quick wins, a lot of pilots that they can test in safe spaces. They can create safe spaces for people to experiment, to know more about this, and to become enthusiasts of the technology. Once you have those people and sharing that, okay, this has changed my productivity, this has changed the way I'm doing things, then you can actually see the real results of companies. The other thing I've seen, and this has surprised me a lot, is that there's something in IT called shadow IT, which means that a lot of people in organizations are using AI without having the permission of the company. That's called shadow IT. So people are saying, oh, my company does not provide a license to ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. I'll pay it for myself. And it's not the same having an enterprise level access to these models than having your own model. But that's also happening. So it's no surprise you're seeing a lot of companies with cyber attacks. You're seeing a lot of that in the world, but it's because of a flawed change management process. You have that the speed in which you need to change, and companies are assuming that if they just put everyone together in a town hall and say, yes, now we're an AI first company, we'll embrace this. Uh, by magic, everybody will know the new capabilities. They will get the vision. They will experiment. They will find the use cases. That's not the case, because you also need champions of that change, and you need to carve time to experiment and to really do deep dives into the use cases that can really transform the business. So I think it's a process, not an event. And I think that companies need to focus on the complete process instead of thinking this is a one-time event.
Julio, let's talk about your entrepreneurial journey for a moment. You founded Scholars and Bright Domino, and you've scaled educational impact across different cultural contexts. What lessons have you learned about using AI to reach people in different countries, different cultures? What works and what does not?
So a bit of background. I am originally from Guatemala. Guatemala is a very small country, but also a very entrepreneurial country. We have a lot of great things here. So Duolingo started in Guatemala, for example. Instant coffee was also invented in Guatemala. And the Happy Meal from McDonald's was also invented by a Guatemalan. So some of the inventions were very entrepreneurial, but were not necessarily very innovative, which is it's very different. You can be very creative, but not necessarily build a company or have a patent, for example, and that drives into the difference between being creative and innovative. What's the actual value that you can drive from that idea and that creativity? So I saw a country with a lot of ideas, a lot of entrepreneurial. We're one of the, according to the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor study, we're one of the most entrepreneurial countries in the world. And we see a lot of people flourishing in different continents, in different countries, but not necessarily in our own country. So I thought, how can I fix this? How can I improve this? How can I have a dent in this problem? And I've always loved education since I was very young. You can imagine my Halloween costume was a university toga, and people were like, "Oh, you're disguised as what? As a nerd?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So I've loved education since I was very young. I've also loved entrepreneurship and I've also loved technology. I have never had a job in my life. I've been an entrepreneur for my whole life. So I began to see that the access to education was a big problem in my country, especially in rural areas of my country. So here you have a lot of schools, but most of them are private. And whether you have the resources to attend those schools or you don't. So it's a huge access gap. So there's a lot of brilliant people that might simply don't have the resources, or maybe they live very far away from a great school. So I thought technology might help us do this. So mind you, this was before COVID. So the idea is, how can I transform a traditional school and build a school online, but from scratch? So we invited, for example, YouTubers. And I thought, who has already solved this? So YouTubers had already solved that challenge. They had already engaged learners in different content, and they had already created very engaging content that students, teenagers, kids spent hours very engaged. So we started from what's working. We did not start a school by converting a traditional school to an online school, but rather what is already working and how can we build a school based on that. So that was a basic idea. So we began to study YouTubers, we began to study other types of learning content, simulations, games, and then we began to build a platform. Uh, Long story short, we designed several prototypes. We invested millions of dollars, and all of a sudden, when we began to test it out in focus groups and with actual students, they were like, "We don't like this," and you already have a lot of investments, and we pivoted several times until we found a model that students loved. And we began to see study after study that students were very engaged, almost 92% retention rate, and students saying, "We love this." But the key idea was something different. It was making them part of their learning journey. It's something that's part of the Montessori method, also other non-traditional methods, is a student-centered approach. When you start with the student's questions, and this sounds obvious, but most programs are not designed in that way. They're faculty centered or syllabus centric. They're not centered on what the student actually wants or their own talents, their own passions. So this was the basic idea, a flipped classroom where they are in the center of the learning. We ask the questions, we provide a an environment that they can test their own questions, they can go into their own learning pathways. So now that we have built something that worked and it worked fabulously, you can imagine having approval from the Ministry of Education. That was torture because it was the first time they did not get it. It was like, why are you building this? Nobody wants to study online. Thankfully, we got our approval before COVID, just before COVID. And then COVID hit. So when all schools began to translate terrible teaching, but via Zoom, you can imagine we were a very different model. And people were saying, wow, the two of you, my partner and I, are so visionaries. We were not. We were just uh, listening to the market. We were listening to kids, we were listening to teenagers, and we were listening to actual YouTubers that, for example, having a great camera makes a difference. Having a great microphone makes a difference. Having smaller pieces of content in a different way and engaging the learners makes a huge difference. So a lot of lessons learned. First, as entrepreneurs, we sometimes are very arrogant in thinking that we have the right answers before asking the market. That was one of my first takeaways. The second is we tend to overestimate our success rates, and we think that if we lead the venture, we will be successful. Actually, a professor from Harvard, Noah Wasserman, did a study that it's for me it was fascinating because it asks entrepreneurs, if you were to build this business and you run it by yourself, what are your odds of success? And no surprises there, most entrepreneurs would say complete success, 80% success. But if they asked a different question, let's imagine you were to build the same company, but you are not the CEO, you're not the founder. What are the odds of success? And surprisingly, almost half of the success rates there. So we tend to think that we're the ultimate superheroes, that we can solve everything. So that happened to me the same here. I tended to underestimate the costs, underestimate how challenging it was to be the first in the market. It took a lot of money, a lot of efforts to get. I remember talking to my partner and I said, "No, this is going to be a huge success because everybody wants a different type of education. Everybody will get it." It has been more than 6 years, and it's still a challenge because we're the first ones. So we needed to be the first ones communicating the vision, to saying, okay, this is different. So that's also a lesson. And the third, get the right team. That's one of the most important pieces of advice I could give to an entrepreneur. And you need at least three key parts of any type of entrepreneurship venture. One, the person that has the vision, that it's the visionary. You need a visionary. The second key role is the salesperson. You need somebody that it's a machine to sell, that can go to the market and make sure you sell. And last but not least, somebody in charge of finances. And it's not necessarily the same person. Sometimes we think that as entrepreneurs we can do the three roles at once. We can't. It's a team effort, and you really need to have that basic team. Somebody that has the vision, somebody that can sell anything, and somebody that loves to take care of the bills. Because as entrepreneurs, if you're the visionary, you're not necessarily very comfortable in charging for what you do. And for example, in my case, in Escolaris, I tend to be the visionary, but not the finance person. So
I'm the
I thought,
same.
"Oh, I would give it for free and then no worries." And my partner is great at finances. So he's like, "Oh, I love your vision. Let's charge for this because we need money to make sure this is sustainable in the long term." So build your vision. Uh, and last but not least, definitely not least, know your market, because sometimes you're building something that it's not for you. We were building something for a reality that I didn't know firsthand. I had to go to the actual households and see that people sometimes they didn't have a bathroom in their houses. And I wanted to democratize education. And this was the persons I was trying to serve, but they didn't have access to basic electricity. So how was I fixing something that I was not aware of the needs of the market? So we really need to dive into that. I think that these principles apply both to technology, but also to entrepreneurship, and especially the way that the world is working right now.
Now I'm curious to learn more about your book, ChatGPT: How to Boost Your Business with AI. Can you share a surprising use case, something where you thought, wow, I did not expect AI to deliver results like this, something that's really exceptional?
So prompt engineering does make a difference. So I'll provide a basic framework for us to have and hopefully to share. Uh, basic things. The first is whenever you write a prompt, role is crucial. So the first step is define a role. AI is training a model in a way that access data and data points in a very different way. If you, the first step is how do I define a role? So for example, act as a professor from Harvard, act as a seasoned anthropologist, act as a professional podcast designer, act as a professional TED Talk speaker. So the first is role. Step two is the objective. What are you trying to accomplish with the AI? So I'm trying to figure out a talk or a script or a video content? What's the objective? Step three, what's the context? So is this a video for your board? Is this a video for K to 12 students? Is this for teenagers? What's the context? Is this for a country from Latin America? Is this for Mexico, or is this for the US? And last but not least, the restrictions. So, what are the restrictions? What are the no-nos? The Make sure you don't do this, or make sure you always do this. So, for examples, a restriction might be when you're writing, don't use M dash. That's a restriction, and that's usually one of the key signs you're using AI is the M dash. Uh, AI models absolutely love the M dashes, but you can prompt it in that way. So role, objective, context, and restrictions. So one of my key surprises, that's the first one, that writing a prompt does make a huge difference. And it can be a difference between enjoying the platform and getting a lot of it versus getting terrible results. The second is there's a step by step approach that I call the 4 S's that make a huge difference. So, first S is seek. So, if you use the right tool to seek for information, you'll get better results. So, for example, ChatGPT is not designed for searching information, it was not designed for that. So, better tools for searching are Perplexity, are Elicit, are SciSpace, our site, our consensus. Some of these tools were built for seeking information. So if you want to use AI properly, the first step is, where do I seek information or data? So these are some of the tools. Then there's step two. Now that you have the right data, where do I make sense of data? So step one is seek. Step two is sense. Where do I make sense of data? So making sense of data, then you can use Claude, you can use ChatGPT, you can use Grok, you can use Gemini, you can use Notebook LM, you can use a lot of the different models to make sense of data. And there are also built for purpose tools to make sense of numbers. So, for example, tools like Julius AI is great for making sense of numbers, especially huge spreadsheets or Excel documents. That excels in that. Or a tool such as Data Squirrel that makes sense of numeric data as well. And you can create scorecards just by talking to the platform. So first, you've sought out information. Step one is seek. Second step is sense. Step three is show. Now that you have processed data, there are built for purpose tools where you can show your data in different ways. So, for example, if you want to create a presentation, you can use a platform such as Gamma. If you want to create an infographic, there's a tool such as Napkin that is a built for purpose tool to build great infographics. If you want to build a video, you can use tools such as Hagen, such as Synthesia, such as Lumen 5. If you want to show graphics, you can use Ideogram, or you can use Midjourney, or you can use the latest model by Google Gemini's Nano Banana. Uh, if you want to create a song, you can use Suno. So seek, sense, show, and the last step is where we're approaching, which is the systemic approach, where we're building agents to streamline a lot of these processes. So those were my two main findings. The first is that content engineering or content prompt engineering does make a huge difference. The second is that there are tools built for purpose. And most people are only using ChatGPT to do all of the above. But there are great tools with these tools, for example, have no hallucinations because they were trained in that way. Um, Another example, a lot of people are searching for information for medical terms. There's a great app for that called Open Evidence. This is a tool that it's trained only on the New England Journal of Medicine, and also it's used by the Mayo Clinic. So here, if you want to search for medical terms or medical information, that's a great tool built for that. So making sure you seek, sense, show, and use a systemic approach that can change your whole experience with AI.
Wow, this is incredibly useful, Julio. Thank you for sharing. I have to admit that my very first shock happened when you talked about all those applications in greater detail for doctoral students at Penn. It was so helpful for me as an entrepreneur and as a scholar to have different apps for different purposes. So thank you so much for sharing the same information with Harvard community. We really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Julio, we don't have much time left, but I really want to ask you the last question about your role as CMO at the RBL Group. You're working with some of the top minds in leadership development. How are you using AI to transform traditional consulting models? What does leadership development look like when AI is in the mix?
So it's a great question because we've always had that same challenge that working with great minds, but minds that sometimes they are traveling. They have packed agendas. They have if they're doing work with a client, they cannot do a work with a different client. So here is where AI and technology can help us in this to democratize that. So we've had a lot of conversations with some of the best thought leaders to try to download what they know and to build data sets for us to train AI models. So that has been one of my current work. How do we download everything they know and how they do this? And by the way, this is no, there's nothing new in what I'm saying. This is basic knowledge management. This is exactly what Steve Jobs did when he was diagnosed with cancer the first time. He hired a professor from Yale Business School to document business cases as the ones we study at Harvard. So it was training it was training people to understand how he thought about problems. And that's exactly the same thing we're doing with these minds. So we're trying to figure out, okay, how would they approach this challenge? How would they approach this way of thinking? What do they think about leadership or talent or organization? And afterwards, we're building AI models to become coaches of sorts where we can test out our ideas using their own frameworks, their own data, their own thought analysis. So it has been very promising, very mind blowing what you can do right now. And I think that the real promise lies when we can democratize this, when more people can have access to the brightest minds, where we can have a thought partner with using AI. And I always love to say that AI, we need to think of AI as an assistant or as an intern, somebody that can help you with the process, not instead of you being in the center. That's the reason Microsoft called it Copilot, because you're the pilot, but this is a Copilot that's helping you in the process.
Oh, I love that definition, Julio. Julio, I just want to say thank you so much for being here with us today. What strikes me most is how you've taken something that can feel overwhelming, AI and all this rapid change, and made it feel accessible, human, and honestly exciting. I'm very excited. And I actually will go back and rewatch the interview to get all those applications. I feel like some of the applications are new that I've never heard about. So I have to go back to rewatch this interview. And on behalf of everyone in our global chapter here at Harvard, thank you for your time, your wisdom, and your passion for education and innovation. This has been incredibly valuable, and I know the impact of this conversation will ripple throughout our community for a very, very long time. Thank you so much, Julio.
No, thank you, Gwen, and please count me in as a friend. You can add me on LinkedIn. I'm here to serve any way that I can help you. If you want to chat about current tools, I'm here. I'm a friend, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye bye, my friends.